We're just going to put this up because we got multiple streams going here. We're going to see if this works. So, hopefully it does. If something goes awry, let us know. But we started a stream. I got some questions from my buddy that sent me a couple of these podcasts. And this gentleman, I think his name is Brandon, the guy speaking here shortly. But we talk about the most dangerous story, and here's why. So this is the story of Abraham and Isaac. So just for kicks, I brought Justice along. Do you know the story of Abraham and Isaac, Justice?
Yeah.
How does that make you feel right now?
I don't know. No, nothing.
No? Okay. Well, without further ado, I'm going to keep charging my phone if this will plug in, but let's see. All right, so one viewer, welcome. If this gets confusing, let us know. But this is this guy's podcast, so I don't know if you can see us on the broadcast or the live side, but I'm going to play some of what this gentleman has to say, so you won't see it on the live side. Why is it?
Today's episode with a question for those of you that believe in the God of Abraham. What would you do if this God asked you to kill your child? Not spiritually, not metaphorically, literally asked you to kill your child.
So that's the first question, Justice. So you don't have children, but I do. It's terrifying. All right, so what is your most beloved thing in this planet? Because that's probably how I would define
Probably family.
family.
Yeah.
Well, that's how I would feel about you, and so that's why I feel like it would be. I feel like that would potentially be the hardest thing I've ever had to do or been asked. And so in saying that, I did actually put together some ideas of why I think that would be so difficult. And do you feel like you see that trend in the Bible where God asks us to do things that are nearly impossible?
Kind of.
Like I feel like it's a lot less time involved, but it would be a lot more intense. What if God told you to build an ark?
I'd build a small ark.
But God didn't say to build a small ark. He gave him the dimensions, right?
Oh, well, if he did, then I'd do it, probably.
So what if he said it's got to be 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high?
I don't know.
Well, I guess my point is that I think that the Bible has some pretty extreme ideas of what commitment looks like, right? Right? So I think that this is just another one of those. However, I feel like this is not to minimize it, because I'd much rather build an ark than take yours or anybody else's life. But let's keep going with this review video and see where it goes.
Would you obey? Before you answer, let me introduce you to a few people that did. Andrea Yates in 2001, a devout Christian in this century, in this country, took her 5 children one by one to the bathroom and drowned each of them. She was asked point blank, "Why did you do this?" She said, "I had to. I had to obey God." Isn't that what we're supposed to do? Isn't that the definition of biblical morality? Maybe that's something you haven't thought about much. We are going to get into it, but a couple more examples. How about Deanna Laney, another Christian mother? She bludgeoned her 2 sons to death in the backyard. She believed sincerely that God was testing her, just like Abraham. She literally...
So what do you think about that, Justice? Does that sound pretty crazy?
Kind of. Not really.
I mean, like, are you talking about the woman that killed her sons to, like, bludgeon them? Or are you talking about the biblical story?
Oh, that.
This? Yeah. Well, I think that, so when we talk about hearing the, is it done?
Kinda.
So I think when we talk about hearing the voice of God, me personally, that's something where I would say that I don't actually hear like a outward, like, Kyle, you need to do this with your life. What I hear personally is, well, I don't hear the voices in my head. I guess you could say that. So I feel like this is one of those perfect instances where you need to have the ability to rightly divide what is God and what's kind of the own internal voice in your head saying, you need to do this, you need to do that. But also, on that note, I don't feel as if God, that was the whole point of having Jesus step into the role of paving the way for our salvation. Because there was this propensity for human and animal sacrifice. So that's a big thing in the unbelief or the atheists' viewpoint, is that, you know, their belief is that there's a lot of it's like a blood cult, and that there's a huge desire for blood. And so I do think that that's a huge degree of separation between the Old and the New Testament. You have anything to say on that?
Not really.
Because I was kind of looking at this to kind of get into this a little bit deeper. Oh, that's putting that over on that screen, huh? Why is it doing that? So, anyways, we'll play this real quick and continue.
He cited Abraham and Isaac in court. She said very confidently, I knew God would stop me if he didn't really want me to do this. But he didn't stop her. How many parents at Jonestown poisoned their babies, their children, because Jim Jones claimed it was divine authority? How are we supposed to know the difference between the voice of God and mental illness? Psychologists note that religious delusions are among the most common in cases of psychosis. Many hear voices that sound divine. They feel compelled to act. And yet, when those commands are horrific, we rightly call it madness. Unless, of course, it's in the Bible. I have no doubt that if you are a Christian and you are exposed to any of the cases that I just brought up, you have no problem judging it, saying they shouldn't have done that. Clearly that wasn't from God. But I ask you, how can you say that when we have...
What's up, Marcel? How are you doing? Welcome. We're just tackling some tough questions in our little Bible study. So welcome. Thank you for coming. I think that this goes back to that point too, is it's like you got to be able to know what is the difference between what God would ask of your life and when are you actually hearing, Kyle, you're going to go build an ark, or it's time for human sacrifice. But I don't feel like, I mean, at this point, luckily, I don't think that we have to answer that question. Maybe potentially some things that are just as difficult, but I believe that it's not just like this idea in the back of your head. I believe if God tells you, then he's going to make a way for those things to happen. But you're going to know because, I mean, at this point, this was one of the commandments that now would be a violation, but at the same time, God provided the ram, right? So, and in more ways than one.
The example of Abraham and Isaac. By the way, I know what excuses you have, and please stay tuned to the end of the video. I'm going to handle each objection one by one. The reason I even wanted to make this video, one quick personal story, and then we're going to dive into all of it here, is the very first time I actually said out loud that I was an atheist was with my wife, my sister, and my brother-in-law. We had a little debate that lasted the rest of the night while he pressed me on my position. And at one point, we got to some of the horrors of the Old Testament, and I brought up the character of a God that would test someone like Abraham, the patriarch of the religion, to see if he would kill his son. And I didn't realize this was such a common trope to throw out at Christians to prove a point, but I genuinely asked him, you believe in this God, if this God told you to kill your baby, my sister was pregnant at the time with their first child, would you do it? He avoided the question. I kept pressing. Then he tried to tell me it wasn't in God's nature, so this hypothetical didn't even make sense, to which I pointed all the times that God did kill children, and that whether or not he had Abraham go through with it, Abraham didn't know that. So this happening very much is in the nature of this God. And I'll never...
So, do you have any feelings or thoughts on that?
No,
No?
not really.
Okay, so here's one of my thoughts is that I believe that God, I mean, just like the vast majority of our life, a lot of it is we're given the opportunity to choose freely in between a multitude of decisions. But I feel like God most commonly honors the component of obedience. And anytime that there's an idol or idolization in between us and something else, even our own child, then, I mean, we know that God can be a jealous God. And I do believe that that's a healthy jealousy, but obviously I do think that that can be understood in a way that is obviously, you know, we could call this a toxic approach or relationship or whatever, but you know, I don't believe that that's the case. I believe that there's healthy jealousy in relationships. Do you agree with that?
Kinda.
Okay. Why not, or why?
I kinda do and I kinda don't.
Well, if, let's say, two people are married, do you think that it's okay for one of the people that are married to entertain another potential romantic interest,
No.
right? And you're 12 and you understand that, right? So that's a healthy form of jealousy, in my opinion. And I believe that this is a very, like, not necessarily romantic, obviously, but I still feel like this kind of dives into that dynamic of Abraham for many, many years wanted a child. And do you remember what he did?
Yeah, he killed his son and cut his head off.
He killed his son. He
No,
didn't kill
he
his son.
didn't do that.
No.
Well, he went to like hit him with the thing.
He was gonna kill him, but he didn't.
Well, he didn't cause God.
Right. God stepped in and said that I provided this lamb, right?
Well,
Or ram,
yeah, I think so.
right? So my personal opinion is that so Abraham was trying to have a kid for many years, and he and his wife could not have a child together. So just like many times, I feel like that's a very common theme, that what happens is that we tend to go out and try to provide something else as a substitute. And so what happened was he ended up basically sleeping with this servant that they had had to try and have a child that they thought that they were supposed to have. And I believe that we try to many times circumvent the way God wants us to do it in our own way. And this is just kind of one of those where God is really calling us, hey, are you actually going to sacrifice that thing that means so much, or what's going to happen? So, which maybe, depending on if you respond, Brandon, I'll get more questions on that, but that's cool. It's a good conversation.
Never forget his answer. At least he told the truth, but it is a sickening truth. He said, well, if God, which I know he wouldn't, did that, I would only hope that I had as much faith as Abraham to be able to complete it. And if you're a Christian, what other answer can you give? You're called to obey God. To love God is to obey God. You're called to put him above everything else in your life, including your family. Jesus makes that abundantly clear. That's why this test exists in the Bible in the first place. So back to my original question to you believers, if God told you to kill your child, would you? If the answer is no, Congratulations, you have outgrown the corrupt and ridiculous morality of the Bible. If your answer is yes, you show clearly that morality has nothing to do with what is right or what is good. It has to do with who is in power. And you show your blind devotion and your willingness to commit horror and harm for your God of love and peace. So, here's our agenda for today. I want to walk through the story as it's told in Genesis 22 and point a few things out. I want to talk about what morality was like at this time, what that word means, the differences that modern-day Christians can't seem to grasp, and thus are put in this horrendous, tough spot of having to defend a God like this, who is clearly just man-made concepts of their time and place and culture. I want to talk about the praise that Abraham gets from the Bible. I want to talk about divine command theory and its problems. Then I have a simple question for you, and then we're going to handle some of the objections. It sounds like a lot. I think we could go pretty quick here. This is a story that deserves time and attention, though. This is the patriarch of 3 religions. We call it the Abrahamic faiths because of this person. This is the one person in the Bible that was called a friend of God. This is the justification, by the way, that we get for why God could command all the genocide he did, because all the other people were so evil and horrendous, sacrificing their children like Abraham was willing to do, because he was a product of that time and place, like God did, supposedly, because he loves us when he sacrificed his only son, Jesus. This is a death cult. This is a blood magic, sacrificial, scapegoat, backward culture. So, turn your Bibles to Genesis 22. The story begins by saying that sometime later, God tested Abraham. Keep in mind, this is an all-knowing God, but okay, we'll just buy into the fact that he needs to test him. By the way, not sometime later God supported Abraham, comforted Abraham, loved Abraham, taught Abraham, enlightened Abraham. No, tested. And what was he tested for? His generosity? His love? His mercy? Nope. It was obedience through the unthinkable. Next comes the command. Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac. He tells him where to go, and he says, sacrifice him as a burnt offering. God knows what he's asking. He knows the emotional bond. In fact, he names it. Then he demands that it be severed. Cut to the next scene, the morning after. So Abraham rose early in the morning. No questions, no begging, no wrestling, no tears. He doesn't say, why, Lord? He doesn't say there must be another way. He doesn't question, is this really you? Something I think is really important to point out. Going back to the example of my brother-in-law, when he said it's not in God's nature, wouldn't that have struck Abraham's ear wrong?
But isn't that part of the point, right? Part of the point is this seems so completely radical. But at the same time, if we know the God that we serve is stepping in and does have a way, we know that his ways are higher than ours. So even though we know he might be asking something that would sound absurd, I feel like that is the whole point, right? So when he's not having this emotional, I don't believe it's calloused in the sense of emotionally, but strength. And so he knows that God will provide a way that's better than his way, even though that's what's happening here.
If that was the case, wait, I better hold on. Is this really from God? A good God of love, peace, and creation wants me to kill a child? My child? This can't be. Let me double check. But no, he just sharpens the knife and saddles the donkey, splits the wood himself. And Isaac doesn't even know. He walks beside the man that he trusts the most in the entire world, the man that has been put in a place to protect him, to support him, caring.
I feel like that's an interesting parallel to note, right? So if the son trusts the father that much, then Abraham must trust God that much, because that has to be modeled behavior, right? That's kind of my thought. What do you think about that?
Probably.
Right, like you don't trust me because you think that I could potentially murder you at any point, right?
Yeah.
You trust me because I've demonstrated over and over that it's quite the opposite, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I think that that's what's going on here. But of course, if you're just reflecting on this, of course, it's going to sound absurd. And who can blame anybody for thinking otherwise?
The very wood on which he will burn. We move on to the climb, because of course this is done at the top of the mountain where all sacred things happen. Isaac questions, here's the fire, here's the wood, where is the lamb? God will provide the lamb, Abraham answers. Was that a lie? Was that a desperate hope? Or is it just the terrifying truth spoken boldly straight to his son? Keep in mind, we're never told what Abraham is thinking, because in this story, that is not the point. Feeling is not the point. Obedience is. What I'm trying to help give you is the correct context in which the story was originally put, what it was trying to communicate. You're going to see it develop a little bit clearer here in just a second. Next, we get to the altar. The text is sparse, chillingly so. No internal monologue, no hesitation. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar. Does Isaac struggle? Does he cry out? Do we see a look of confusion and abandonment and betrayal? Does he understand what is happening to him? We're not told. Because again, the focus is not on the victim, it's on the virtue of the one holding the
Why is it buffering?
knife. Let that sink in. So then, yes, we get the intervention. The angel of the Lord calls out, "Do not lay a hand on that boy. Now I know that you fear God." Not love God, not trust God, but fear. This was never about compassion, which is how the story is spun when it's included in these children's Bibles, which is so disgusting. It's about control. The story ends not with Isaac's relief, not with a father-son moment, but with Abraham's reward. He passed the test. He obeyed at any cost, blindly and immediately. So what's the message? What's the moral of the story? What is being taught here? That obedience to divine authority trumps all. Trumps emotion, feeling, love, family, anything. That the good father is the one willing to become a murderer if God commands it. The conversation we're having today is on the nature of morality. Something Christians claim over and over is objective. Is killing a child wrong? Doesn't seem like a complicated question. Most of us can simply say yes. But a Christian, a real Christian, can't so easily say that. Not if they want to defend their God, to defend their Bible, or to be 100% obedient. Because then that simple question, is it wrong to kill a child, becomes, well, and that is why religion is harmful. If it depends on your God and how he's feeling that day, or what he might want, or some situation that might necessitate that for him to be able to complete his will, you've lost the morality game. And it's funny because this story is right here, the first book of the Bible. But again, when it serves them, when it's convenient for them to justify another horror, genocide, the number one excuse is you don't understand how evil these people were. They have to be wiped out. Do you know what they're doing? They're sacrificing.
Well, and I think, do you have any opinions on this, Justice? So, like, if we're talking, like, Noah's Ark, like, the amount of evil in the world at that point,
What about it?
do you think God was right in killing everybody other than a few that
Sure.
entered Noah's Ark? Sure?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the question is, well,
And he made it.
right? I mean, I think that that's the whole thing is God
And how
doesn't,
would you feel about if you made a little Lego figurine that moves around and makes little noises and just killing it?
well, I think that there'd have to be a pretty significant underlying rationale to wipe out all of your little Legos if they were acting evil.
I mean, what would you do if they were attacking you and cussing you out?
Well, it would be, I would probably have my fill of them, that's for sure. So I think that that's like, I mean, God doesn't necessarily owe any of us an explanation for what he's doing or how he navigates the world that he created. At least that's my opinion. And of course, we don't know, but those are those questions that, hey, maybe at some point we'll get to ask God when we are done here on this planet.
Children, you mean like Abraham was willing to do, like God did. Now all of a sudden it's wrong, so wrong that the answer to some tribes, sometimes, that sacrifice some children is to kill all the children and all the women and all the men and all the elderly and all the sick and all the animals. It's time to grow up. I'm not usually this stern or trying to cause any controversy, but if you are a grown adult with a fully developed prefrontal cortex and you are still sitting around trying to justify why
So I think that this is an interesting point just because I could see so many people that I know. I mean, you'd be surprised the things that people do within their own human comprehension that they feel like they've been done wrong. So they're gonna go, I mean, it doesn't literally have to be anything that significant for somebody to want to take a life or do something extreme. So that's kind of my underlying personal opinion. What do you think?
What was the question?
Oh, just about wiping out people, wanting to kill them.
Like as God?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I think he's fine doing that.
Right. Kind of my personal thought there too, but that's his call, not ours, right?
Genocide or slavery or child sacrifice was okay when your God did it, then yes, it's time to grow up. It's time to mature morally. But let's move on, because if that's your morality, you're not alone. That was the morality of the world back then. I just did this video on the axial age, the transition, the bridge between mythos and logos. Not that afterwards no one believed in gods anymore, but the questions changed. Can gods be evil? Can they be imperfect? What is true morality? What is it to live a good life? Because in the pre-axial age, like this story from the Old Testament, and we're painting with a broad brush here, this isn't true for everyone that ever lived in every place, in every culture, and every time, but generally speaking, morality was tribal. It was authoritarian. Gods were tribal patrons. Marduk, Baal, Yahweh. Their job was to defend the tribe. They were war gods. Their job was not to be some moral guide. Divine approval meant victory, not virtue. Children were sacrificed in Canaanite and Moabite and even early Israelite traditions. So the story of Abraham wasn't shocking for its time. What's shocking is that it still holds moral weight now, because we've moved past this. Or maybe we haven't. And so that's why I want to move into this next section here, where I show the power.
Do you think that that's still relevant? Since you're the younger generation here?
Like killing?
So like the story of, so really the point of this story, what do you think the story of Abraham and Isaac is significant in?
What do you mean significant?
Like what's the most important reason that that story is being told, do you feel like?
I don't know, to be like a rule or like to show people.
To follow the rules?
No, like to show them what maybe you should do. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So obedience.
Mhm.
So I think that it's extreme for today's culture, as he says. Although he wants to, Brandon, you want to just go right over that like it doesn't mean anything. But I feel like that's a extremely significant reason of why this story is so relevant, even currently. I mean, well, yeah, we'll go on. If we can. Apparently.
Of this one particular story as a moral model. Because Abraham didn't just pass a test. In passing that test, he became the prototype for what it means to have faith. Think about that. All built on this moment. Maybe I wasn't clear. The blessing that follows after he passes this test is this: I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the